So remember about a week ago, the Republicans were all giddy about Virginia and talking about how the numbers look really good for them in Virginia, but you don't see them talk about Virginia anymore. Yeah, there's a reason why that is, and we're going to talk about that in today's video. We're also going to be talking about some more numbers from Wisconsin and Minnesota. Minnesota has some numbers which are great for Democrats, so we're going to delve into those states as well. And we're going to talk about the voting trends and how we might be actually returning to a pre-COVID period where in-person voting might actually start being more prominent. It seems like the vote by mail numbers are going way, way down. So we're going to look at a few states regarding those vote by mail numbers, see how the composition has changed, and what does this mean for the Democrats moving forward. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to delve into the nowcast models for Virginia, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, all still looking really good for Democrats. Again, it's early days, but the Virginia one has a lot more votes, and we can glean a lot more from it and kind of see a trend and where things are going. So let's go ahead, look at that Virginia model first, and talk about why the Democrats are in good shape. All right, so here's the most recent voting trend average nowcast model. So the idea of this model is basically taking how the voting behaviors have happened in the past, kind of figuring out how they average out and how much movement there is in them, and then looking at the votes that are being cast in each county, then determine how those votes are going. And as of right now, with 12.3% of the turnout, if the election were to end right now, Kamala Harris would have a 58% chance of winning to Donald Trump's 42%. Now, that is the percentage of chance of winning. That is not the percentage of the votes. Now, a few people might think that number is a little low, but it's not. Remember, it's a percentage of chance of winning, and you want to be in that 50s, high 50s or 60s. Obviously, being higher is going to be a lot better, but in a state that is like Virginia, 58 seems okay. Now, we might think it might not seem okay compared to the next two states that we're looking at, but let's look at it this way. In Virginia, we have over 12% of the vote in, which the next states we're looking at, we're at the low to mid 3%. So there's still a lot more coming from there. So let's go ahead and look at the Wisconsin nowcast next. So here we go. We got the voting trend average nowcast for Wisconsin for today. Only a 3.7% turnout. So if the election were to end right now with those voters, there's an 84% chance that Kamala Harris would win the state. Only 16% chance of Donald Trump winning the state. So in early voting in Wisconsin, it does look advantageous to Kamala Harris. Of course, this is going to change as we get more and more numbers in, but the start is good and the trend is good, and where the votes are coming from, it really does help the Democrats. And especially since we are seeing that turnout go up, especially with vote by mail, which other vote by mail states are seeing a lot less numbers when it comes to vote by mail. I actually think this is a really good number. Now, the next one is not a misprint when we talk about Minnesota. This is the percentages for the nowcast in Minnesota. So let's go ahead. Got new numbers from Minnesota from yesterday. For some reason, they don't update them every day, but let's go to the nowcast now and see what the likelihood of Kamala Harris winning Minnesota is. Okay, as I mentioned, this is not a misprint. So of the 3.1% of people who have already turned out to vote based on their geography and turnout and composition of the statewide votes, Kamala Harris has a 128% chance of winning the state of Minnesota. So essentially that's a 100% chance. I just wanted to put in 128 to drive that point home, whereas Donald Trump would be at minus 28%. So we are only talking about 3.1% of the vote, but I do think even this early, looking at the trends and seeing how it's going and the distribution of the vote looking pretty good as far as what we could expect for the general election with a little bit of changes, I think we're already starting to see Minnesota be way outside of the realm of Republicans to win. So both in Virginia and in Minnesota, there will be a point that, depending on how many early votes are cast, and remember, in both of these states, we have both vote by mail and in-person voting right now. This is the reason why these turnout numbers are a little bit higher than maybe Florida or North Carolina. So in this situation, as these numbers continue to go up, the turnout numbers, and if the Democrats keep this, that is a lot less of a path for the Republicans to win. I think the Virginia numbers look really good. Of course, they should. That's a state we're expected to win. The Minnesota numbers, I expected these to be a little closer, maybe like the Wisconsin number that we saw. And by the way, that Wisconsin number will shrink. Just letting you know, that will shrink. That's just where we're at now. But these numbers, even this early, didn't expect them that high. I think that Minnesota is an absolute lock and a solid win for the Democrats going into the general election. Now, I didn't run some models on Florida and North Carolina because we still just don't have enough vote in there. But let me go ahead and show you the composition by party of the vote that we have so far. So now, before we get into the next thing, I know a lot of people who come to this channel still have not subscribed to this channel, but we're trying to get the subscriber number up. Please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Hit the little bell if you like what I say to get the notifications about what I'm doing on here. Trying to get out a video every day for election day so that you are informed with the most accurate information when it comes to the election. All right, let's go on to the next thing. So as you can see, in North Carolina, we only have a 0.1% turnout, but of those, 41.2% are Democrats, 22.3% are Republicans, and 36.6% are non-party affiliates or others. The important thing to remember about North Carolina is that we're probably only going to have about a 5% turnout of the overall turnout come from mail-in ballots. So this is a very, very, very small part of the electorate. So we're not going to be able to glean anything from this whatsoever. So don't expect much from these numbers at all. Now, if we look at the Florida numbers, we're almost at 1%. And you can see that the Democrats are up 42.2% over the Republicans at 37.1% of the composition of the mail-in vote, with independents, non-party affiliate, and others at 20.7%. So again, Florida, we don't have huge numbers in, and we have some big discrepancies right now because you have some very large Democratic counties, such as Broward County, Orange County, Duval County, parts of Hillsborough County, that just haven't reported any numbers. So hopefully we'll be able to start getting some more numbers in, especially from Broward County soon. So this sample actually skews a little bit more Republican, even though the Democrats are ahead. We'll see what happens when those votes come in. So anything can change. We need to start having some uniformity amongst the counties as far as their actual representation to what the vote would be in order to really glean anything from a forecast model right now. So talking about vote by mail and everything, we are starting to see a big shift in vote by mail. We're just not seeing as many people request ballots or not as many people submitting ballots as we have in the past. And it makes us wonder if we're now starting to revert back to the old ways in which we used to vote. So let me go ahead and show you Florida, because a lot of people think of Florida Democrats as being vote by mail constituents, right? Well, let me show you the difference between 2016 and 2022 and show you how Democrats voted. So you can see here in 2016, as far as early voting methods amongst Democrats, 60% of Democrats voted in person, whereas only 40% voted by mail. And then you look at 2022 now, post-pandemic, you see that that number has flipped. 36% of Democrats voted in person in 2022, whereas 64% of them voted by mail. And this is just of the early vote. This doesn't include election day vote, obviously, because it wasn't at 0% of election day votes. So you can see in the state of Florida, we have had this massive shift amongst Democrats as to how they vote. And pretty much before the pandemic, even though they were just slightly ahead, the Republicans would actually do better in vote by mail. So all of a sudden, the pandemic, voting in person just kind of jarred everything when it came to the way in which people vote in Florida. Now we're starting to see vote by mail numbers come down quite a bit, and we have to ask ourselves how that's going to impact the election. So let me go ahead and show you the changes in some of the counties that are some of the bigger counties that have already reported. So I'm going to give you Collier County, which is a more Republican county, and Palm Beach County, which typically is a more Democratic county, but Ron DeSantis won it in the last election, and Marco Rubio lost it to Val Demings just by a whisker. So let's go ahead and show you the numbers for those counties as where they were this time in previous elections. All right, so let's go ahead and first look at Palm Beach County, and we're looking 10 days after the ballots were mailed out. So we're going to compare these three elections. These are the ballots that have already been submitted by this time in the election. So if we look at 2020, We can see 62,606 had already been submitted 10 days into this process of vote by mail. As you can see in 2020, 58,335, which is pretty high for a midterm, had already been submitted. But if you look at the same period right now of 2024, 10 days into the vote by mail cycle, you see that only 23,610 have been submitted. So that is a significant drop when we look at Palm Beach County. Now, if we look at Collier County, this one's going to be a little bit different, and let me explain why. So in 2020, of those who had already submitted their ballots, we saw at this point 7,424. Now, they actually submitted the ballots way earlier in Collier County because of COVID. So this is mostly September, not going into October at all. If we bring it up to what the current date is, which of the recording is the 4th of October, this number would be really, really high. But they started their vote by mail process much, much earlier than Palm Beach County. Now, if we go ahead and look at 2022, where we get back into normalcy, we see 14,154 that had been submitted. And now, again, a presidential election year where we should have higher turnouts, we see only 6,175 submitted in Collier County. So, more than double in 2022 we had compared to what we have this year. So as you can see in these counties, we have a tremendous drop in Florida, but it's not just Florida that this is happening. We're seeing it in Virginia as far as the submissions, and we're seeing it in Pennsylvania as far as the requests versus the actual ballots submitted in previous elections. Let me go ahead and show you Virginia really quick. Now you can see in Virginia, and we're going to just look at the last gubernatorial election, you can see of people who voted, 66.7% voted in person compared to 33.3% who voted by mail. So we already have a very large in-person voting number. Now we look at where we are at this point in the election compared to what we had overall 2023. We see that right now 72.5% of the people have voted in person, with only 27.5% of the people having voted by mail. So we see this big drastic shift. So at Pennsylvania, we have to do a little bit of a different look at it because we don't have the request numbers from 2022 or 2020. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at those who actually voted by mail in 2020 and compare that to the request of ballots that we currently have. So if we look at those who actually voted in 2020, we have 2,616,012. So these are the people who actually voted. So that means the request number would be higher than that. So the request number could have been like 3 million. And I know that is a COVID year and a lot more people voted by mail, but we're just doing this for comparison. Now, if you look at 2024, on the other hand, you can see that we have almost or over 1 million voters less just requesting ballots. This isn't of people who have submitted their ballots. These are just of the request. So we do see that this vote by mail number is going down quite significantly in Pennsylvania. Okay, so the vote by mail numbers are going down in all of these states, all of these key states, to be quite honest with you. And who does that favor? Does that favor the Democrats, the Republicans, who? We really don't know, but let me go ahead and show you some numbers out of Palm Beach and Collier counties, the ones that I mentioned before, and I'll show you the voting trends that have been happening in those counties recently. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with Palm Beach County, and these are the totals from vote by mail in 2022 and 24. So you can see registered Democrats, registered Republicans, non-party affiliate, and others. And then at the bottom, we have how the mail-in ballot votes went for the Democratic candidate. So of the mail-in ballot votes, Joe Biden won 70% of them, Charlie Crist won 66%. Now, as you can look at the percentages of Democrats, we only have a 2% change over time. So it's interesting because as the Democratic number went up, the vote share for Charlie Crist went down, which means a lot of non-party affiliates probably voted overwhelmingly for Ron DeSantis in that election. But as you see the numbers, there isn't a real big change, though for the Republicans, you do see a 3% increase. But with each and every election, this number is becoming less and less influential in the election. Now, if we look at Collier County, we kind of see the same thing. So if we look at Democrats, they were only 30% of the composition in 2020. They were 27% of the composition in 2022. And right now they're stuck in the middle at 28%. And you kind of see on the flip side, the Republicans the same way. So 47% in 2020 compared to 53% in 2022. And now they're just right in the middle. And as you can see, with that Democratic drop and increase in Republican votes, Charlie Crist lost a lot more compared to Joe Biden in that. But again, as I mentioned, they're becoming less and less and less part of the overall vote composition. So in the grand scheme of things, we're not really seeing a huge change whatsoever. It just seems like people who had possibly voted by mail in the past are just going to vote either on election day or in-person early voting. Now, as I mentioned before, back in Florida, back in the day, voting in person early was the preferred method for most Democrats. So I think that they're just going to kind of keep with that trend. So we'll go ahead and see if that continues. We won't know that until vote by mail continues to go on. Let's see if these numbers increase. And then once in-person voting starts, then we can see. And I think in-person voting starts like 2 weeks or a week before Election Day in Florida. So we really won't get any really hard numbers for a while. But it does seem with all these states, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Florida, these reduction in the vote by mail numbers shows that we are now having a shift in how people vote. And honestly, it is just a pre-COVID shift. We're getting back to the way that we used to do things before. All right, well, thank you all very much. Sorry, no polls to look at today, but maybe we'll have some tomorrow. Have a wonderful day wherever it is you are. Please subscribe. Please like the channel. Please go ahead and put a comment down below if you have any questions. I'll see you all later. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.